Thank you very much, Oleg. Appreciate it. All right. Welcome everybody. So happy to be here today. It's, to be honest, my first talk, so it's going to be really exciting to see how this goes. I'm sure it's going to go well. So, welcome to my presentation, leveraging cross-industry experience, finding the gaps to unlock a career in gaming. So, before I get into the rest of the talk, I want to apologize beforehand because it's cold season in Sweden right now, and I have a nasty cold. I really didn't look like this, all dressed up and fixed just 10 minutes ago or 20 minutes ago, just letting you know. So please pardon me if I start coughing or I need to step aside for a second to, yeah, clean myself up basically. So apologies for that beforehand. So yeah, let's get to it. So imagine you're in a dynamic world of careers filled with endless possibilities and hidden treasures. And in one corner, you have the world of traditional industries, and in the other one, you have the vibrant realm of game development, which I am in today, and hopefully some of you as well, or intend to at least. Today we're going to look into how the skills you gathered in a seemingly unrelated industries can be key to making a switch into the gaming industry because there obviously are similarities. And you might come to this presentation wondering, so what's the secret of, what's the secret bridge of connecting these two worlds? But before we get into that, and before I actually give you what I believe is the secret sauce of how you make a successful switch from another industry to position in gaming, what if I told you there is no secret sauce, obviously. So sorry to disappoint. There is no secret sauce. I'm a firm believer that there isn't a one size fits all solution or how to make this transition or switch. There are obviously many ways of doing so, but I figured I might inspire some ideas to you by sharing my personal journey on how I transitioned from being an IT professional to securing a job in the gaming industry. So there are obviously several factors that might change the playfield for you and for me as well. That's what it did, and that is education. It can be seniority level, the specific role that you're applying for or looking for. It can be the company you're looking for, the studio itself, and the type of game they're making, whether it's mobile, whether it's VR, whether it's anything really, console gaming, PC. All those factors matter, and it's going to change the battlefield for you going forward. So, why does this presentation even matter to you? So, I believe that some of you, hopefully, are in a similar position as I was many years ago. Otherwise, I don't really know what you're doing here. Trying to navigate. So, what I did was trying to navigate my way through the trenches to enter what seemed to be an impossible industry to get into, at least in Stockholm or in Sweden many years ago, without the right experience and network in the gaming industry. So if that's you, sharpen your keyboards, if that makes sense, because the purpose of this presentation is not only a series of bad jokes by me and puns, but I'm also going to share my most important insights from my own journey when I transitioned. So here's a little bit of an overview of the main points of this presentation. So of course, what's a good story without starting with a bit of spicy personal background? My first steps into gaming, yes, I actually started in gaming, to be honest, after university or during university. How I left the industry for a role in traditional IT to build experience and level up. And the most relevant part for you, of course, my transition back to a career in gaming by securing a senior role at the game studio. So in the end, we're going to wrap up with the juiciest part of this presentation, which of course is my most important learnings and strategies for successful switch between industries, because I'm sure you're wondering by now, how the heck did he do it? Because that's what I was wondering many years ago. Maybe you're in the same position. So who am I? My name is Bengin. Bengin, it's with a G. Git. Most Scandinavians pronounce it Bengin, but it's pronounced Bengin. Don't worry, I'm not offended by it in any way, just letting you know. And I'm currently located in beautiful Stockholm, Sweden. As I said from the beginning, that's why I have a cold now. It's that season of the year. And according to my LinkedIn page, recently I have approximately 8 years in the gaming industry, ranging from my humble beginnings as a QA tester all the way to a leadership role as a producer in video gaming, and also a new role, which I'm going to talk about very soon. So my career ranged from roles at Swedish game developer Paradox Interactive, which was many years ago. I went to Arrowhead Game Studios as a development producer, and today I'm at the Swedish VR developer and publisher of Fast Travel Games. So I originally planned to present myself as a publishing producer, but a couple of days ago, as of a couple of days ago, I transitioned into a full-time role as the publishing business developer at Fast Travel Games. So a switch within a switch, if you may, while I was preparing this presentation, which is pretty cool. So what the heck does a business developer even do in gaming, you might think? So, well, there's several ways to define what a biz dev does. It really depends on where you are and what type of business you're in. But in my case, my day-to-day work involves game scouting, it's portfolio strategy, contract negotiations, and driving overall growth for our publishing wing at Fast Travel. So long story short, in simple terms, I talk to a lot of talented people all the time. I review a ton of game pitches, VR game pitches, I should say, which is really cool. And of course, making sure I drive revenue and my board of directors expect me to make us more money. So I'm a firm believer of functional reform. Doesn't need to be prettier or fancier than that. That's my job. That's basically what I do, whatever that entails. So by now, you might also ask yourself, who put this guy on the stage and why? Why the heck? Why is he here just throwing all those jokes and mumbling about? So well, I did the switch from a seemingly related, yet very distinct worlds of government agencies and banking to the gaming industry. And I'm here today to share my journey with you guys and how I navigated this significant change of industries and what I learned from it. That's why I'm here. So, if we go far back in time, I started off by pursuing a career to become a lawyer, believe it or not. But I realized on the way that it definitely wasn't something for me. And I thank my fiance for that realization. She saw how miserable I was as I struggled, finding the motivation to keep myself going forward during university. It was really a terrible time. It was not my dream that I was trying to fulfill. So, what did I do about it? I pivoted and studied computer and system sciences at Stockholm University, which also led me to secure my first job as a QA tester at Paradox Interactive in Stockholm. So that was probably the first real switch that I made. And as the time went by, I evolved in my role as a QA tester, and I came to the conclusion that I more or less wanted to take on more responsibility, more ownership, and pursue a career as a producer and start working with basically management, with people, with projects, budgets, and all that kind of stuff. So I asked myself, if can I really realize my goal in my current environment where I am? Can I realize my long-term dream where I am now if I just keep struggling? So competition was tough, obviously, and the gaming, I think the gaming industry at that point was, at least in Stockholm, was in its crawling or early walking stage phase, which is pretty early in normalization. If you look at the company itself, at the companies themselves. And I felt I didn't get the exposure that I needed to climb the corporate ladder. So I really need to do something about this. So I had to stop and explore if there are more efficient ways to reach my goal to become a producer. So I came to the conclusion that there was a possibility of branching outside of gaming because there's so many bigger companies out there that have accumulated years and decades of experience in software development, in project management and whatnot. So I was convinced that that was a good way for me to go to build more and also relevant experience. And that's a very important, that's key in that rationale. So by leveraging my experience from shipping a bunch of very expensive games through Paradox Publishing, I managed to nail a job as an IT consultant at the French multinational consultancy firm Capgemini. Jesus, that's a mouthful. I've been trying to say that so many times, but I managed. So during my approximately 2 years at Capgemini, I had the opportunity to take on several complex assignments or consultancy assignments, both within a government agency in Sweden, but also the banking sectors at Ikano Bank in southern Sweden in Malmö. And at this point, you might, of course, wonder why the heck did this guy even leave the colorful and interactive world of interactive entertainment, basically. You were already in. Why did you leave? and instead jumped headfirst into a world of what some would call, honestly speaking, boring. Uh, you might think, was it because of the bigger paycheck or the fancy suits? Of course not. That was not the reason. That was not why I went there. And trust me, there's a good rationale behind that choice of leaving the gaming industry to a more seasoned and experienced IT company, basically. So why did I transition to IT? Making smart choices, obviously, and that's my message to you. So in my mind, this was the perfect decision for me to reach my ultimate goal of securing a leadership position in gaming. So by exposing myself to a huge organization with decades of accumulated experience in topics such as software development, leadership, problem solving, structures, strategy, and rational thinking, even partnerships, networking, and that kind of stuff. Because I didn't feel like we were exposed to those, or we didn't talk as much about those factors while I was in the gaming industry, at least at the company I was at that time, and in my position then, of course. So I saw this as the perfect opportunity for me to grow and sharpen relevant skills that I felt that the gaming industry was lacking. So eventually, I could bring those skills back full circle back to the gaming industry. So now that I have collected these new skills and experiences, what now? So now that the filler slides are out of the way, just like the last season of How I Met Your Mother, I don't know if you've seen that, but the last season was terrible. We come to the juicy part of this presentation. I'm sure this is why you're here, not just for the bad jokes, obviously. So at this point, I began considering how to best adapt my experiences as an IT professional, basically, or a consultant to the needs of a game studio. And at this point, the challenge was very daunting. I literally asked myself, like, how would I ever convince a game studio to consider someone, with a background in government agencies and banking to be suited to lead a team of extremely talented and creative people in a development studio in gaming? Why would they even consider me? So I started worrying and thinking, what if I discouraged them with my fancy suit and my corporate bravado, because that's basically who I was back then. And what you see here in the image that I fetched out of Google, obviously that's not me, you can probably tell. Um, that more or less symbolizes exactly who I was back then, looking all cool and professional with my sunglasses and the latest iPhone and that kind of stuff. So at this point, I reached out, tried to by networking, obviously. I reached out and got in contact with the folks over at Swedish studio Arrowhead Game Studios, who developed Helldivers 1 and Helldivers 2, if you're familiar with those titles. I was genuinely worried when I talked to them, so I had to approach this in a really smart way as I reached out to them. And I pondered, how can I convince them that my skills are relevant for their business? So with the rational approach in mind and a strategy, I understood what my next steps were. So they were definitely identifying parallels from my previous experiences to fill the gaps of their organization. So leveraging the skills I gathered at Capgemini, of course, on the previous time as a QA tester at Paradox Interactive, but mainly from Capgemini to meet their specific needs as a development studio and how I can add value with that knowledge. So after weeks of networking, maybe it was even months, it was a while back, but it was a long time, pretty long time. I was aware that Arrowhead Game Studios were missing a production organization, both in terms of QA and also production leadership. So at this point, I realized that my main unique selling point to get my foot in the door were very clear to me. And my strategy was to leverage my expertise in agile methodologies, my expertise in QA management, my expertise in project management, in networking, social structures, culture, and coupled, of course, and this is probably very, very, very key here, is also coupled with my relentless passion for gaming and game development. There's literally nothing else exists in my life except for my dog and fiance, obviously. So with these key aspects in mind, I successfully I successfully convinced the studio of my ability to provide the value that they needed to ship their games or the game that they were working on at that point. And in the end, through a well crafted plan, strategic networking, and of course a bit of luck, I secured a senior position as the studio's first ever development producer, or at least on that project, which has been ongoing for quite some time. So, first producer, which was really great. So, I really felt I hit the jackpot there. So now that the fairy tale is over, drawing from my own journey, let's summarize the key insights from my transition between industries. First one, of course, I like to call be brave but not foolish. So this is something that I learned on the way with a lot of guidance from my mentor, Lars. Shout out to Lars. I don't know if you're around, but a lot of insights from that man, very wise. So the key to making the right decisions is to do the groundwork first, and that is very, very important. Define where you want to go in terms of discipline and role and platform and type of games you want to make, what the studios are looking for, obviously, how you will get there and make career decisions based on those aspirations. That's very important. You wouldn't get into a car without knowing where you're headed, right? And secondly, analyze to find the industry gaps. This might be a difficult one, but try to understand what the biggest struggles are within the studios and the relevant disciplines that you are aiming for. My way of getting this information, you might ask, as I said before, networking. Talk to a lot of people from the industry, ask the relevant questions, get to know them, and try to identify those gaps. And of course, you need to find parallels between your experience from industries outside of gaming. Those parallels are key as well. So you might be surprised how many similarities there are in terms of production challenges, for instance, between traditional software development and game development. There are many similarities. And for me, the parallels that allowed me to transition to a senior production role was my perspective of defining quality, defining success, analyzing development processes, establishing development strategies, among other things. Those were key for me, at least. And of course, this was all coupled again with relentless passion for game development. And last but not least, networking, networking, networking. It feels quite silly telling you this because we're here together at this amazing event, networking event, but I can't emphasize how important this is. So you're making a good choice of being here, obviously. And to get your foot in the door, you need to get out there and talk to people. Don't be shy, approach people. Most folks in the gaming industry are very, welcoming, very warm people. So I mean, do it. That's the right approach, I think. So with that said, we are a bit over time. So thank you so much for tuning into my talk. I really hope that you're leaving this talk with some nuggets of wisdom. I hope that there's some practical advice that might help you guide your transition in between industries, hopefully to the gaming industries. And if you have any questions, then please feel free to hit me up here and afterwards as well on my LinkedIn page. It's in my profile. Thank you.
We have a question. What exactly was those skills that you felt the gaming industry is missing back in the time?
Right. Yeah. So like I mentioned, I felt like when I worked at both Arrowhead Game Studios and I worked at Paradox Interactive, I felt like they hadn't worked and thought about those issues that are very common in terms of strategy, in terms of decision making, in terms of establishing a strong culture in software development. So one of the major skills I think that I could bring to the table, because again, being brave but not foolish means that there are a lot of people in the gaming industry that are fearless. They have strong passion for things, but they can be very foolish because they don't do the groundwork first. They are driven by relentless passion. They're driven by so much genuine passion for game development that they don't stop themselves and think about the things that are trying to achieve and measuring those as well. So I think coming in with a strategic mindset, with a project management background, and establishing good decision making processes, coupled with my interest in game development, obviously has helped me a lot. And I think that is what I managed to get the foot in the door at Arrowhead Game Studios back then. So, yeah.
How do you think the games education is it? How do you see the games education? Is it helping people to get in the industry, or what's your view on that?
I totally believe so. I mean, through my time both at Arrowhead and Fast Travel Games, we hired a bunch of people right out of school. I think Arrowhead Game Studios, the studio today is about 100 people. When I started, there were about 45 or 42. At that point, I think over 60% of the workforce at the studio were all fresh out of school from the beginning. So that's where they started, and continued hiring people both directly from out of school and with experience, of course. So if I would go back in time, I would probably consider taking a game development or education in game development, probably. So I think that's a very good chance, a very good opportunity, I think, to get the foot through the door. Absolutely, yeah, a firm believer.
What's the best practices in networking when you are overseas slash online?
Ah, that's a very good question. That's interesting because that's how I ended up here, obviously. Um, so online, overseas. Well, first of all, I did my research, did my groundwork, trying to look at the different regions in the world, how much they're investing in game development, if they're growing, what the hype level is, of course, trying to get basically gauge the activity in a certain region. So what I did was LinkedIn was one of my first ways of communicating. That's how I reached out to a lot of people. Most people don't answer, obviously. Secondly, I looked at the events like the one you're at right now, and tried to network with people through there by asking questions like you are doing now. Genius move. So applauding. That's great. But then also I was sent to Gamescom through my current company as well, and that is also one way for me to network. So I went to the events that are after hours and that kind of stuff, and just try to connect with people. So I didn't know anyone from the MENA region, to be honest. So I just LinkedIn, I don't know LinkedIn, throw out a message, meeting them at events, and basically forcing myself on them. That sounds really weird, but it's in a good sense, obviously.
This is really interesting question. I've been working with indie studios, so basically had multiple roles I needed to take personally. I worked in product management, game design, game artist, and I worked in most of them as a senior. So now I became really hard for me to write my resume role. What advice would you give me for my resume?
Let's see, was that, if I heard correctly, was that a marketing role?
No, I think that it's somebody who worked and wear different hats, like in product management, game design, game art, and now writing this in a resume, maybe like to get a job, maybe at the bigger studio.
Ah, I see. I see. Yeah, I mean, again, like for me, I think it's slightly more difficult today as compared to many years ago to being like a Swiss knife type of person or having that wide expertise. I think there might be a good opportunity for you to maybe decide which route you want to go and specialize in, even if you're specialized in all of those traits. So I think it's good to have a vertical approach, trying to find a specific vertical that you want to specialize yourself in and put all your effort and time on that to get into a specific company, because everyone aren't looking for one person with several hats, at least at a bigger studio. So they have a wider range of disciplines, obviously. So I think it's good to find a vertical that you think that fits you and that you think that is fun, gives you energy, and place a bet on that, I think, for bigger studios.
This is well, okay. What is the best way to communicate or reach out to esports and gaming investors, or investors community, I guess, in the games industry?
Ooh, I can tell you this: esports. I haven't touched that yet, so I haven't been in that industry, so I can't really speak for that. But getting in touch with investors, it really depends on what your goal is. So if your intention is to pitch a game, then of course you need to do your research, try to find who is key from their end from a biz dev side. Like for me, for instance, going through the website, looking at the publishing emails, and trying to reach out that way through scheduling meetings with them, through networking events like this one, for instance. I did that at GDC, I do it at Gamescom as well. That has been the most efficient way of me to get in touch with either investors or people who want to pitch their games. So it's that's from a pitching perspective. So I'm not sure if you're looking for a job in an investor sector or in a publishing sector, but that's probably the best way, I think. Yeah. in terms of
Bengin, you
networking.
talked about the skills that you brought to the industry. What about the skills that you gained through your journey in the gaming industry?
I have to neglect that one. That's a pretty good question. I haven't really thought about that, but the skills I think one thing that really speaks for game development, there's a lot of empathy and camaraderie in game development, and that is something that I honestly didn't get much exposure to outside of gaming, to be honest. Maybe I was unlucky. In some teams, I actually did, especially at the Econo Bank. I did. I had a small team and we got along really well. But especially in game development, the creative process and the challenges you have in terms of creating interactive products, that has that experience is priceless, to be honest. I haven't It's so difficult to forecast in game development of what you want to achieve and what the end product is going to be, because the environment is ever changing all the time. So having that flexibility and being agile enough to pivot while you're working with very creative people and telling them their ideas don't work, I think if you would put that in one word, I'm not sure what word that would be, but empathy, camaraderie, and probably being, again, fearless but not foolish is probably a very strong principle that I've learned through game development. You need to tell creative people that their creations suck sometimes, and that sucks.
Nice. What are ways to show your skills as QA?
Ways to show us QA. Yeah, so for me, first thing I did was, of course, I wanted to nail down a lead position or QA manager position after I was a QA. So in order to show that I can strategize, I can set up goals, I can measure our work done, I can plan and execute and deliver. Those were key aspects for me as I transitioned over to a QA manager role. So translating those into project management is probably a very common and natural transition, I think, at least in the gaming industry, from QA to production. So it's basically the ability to create, execute plans, understand goals based on those plans, and being flexible and pivot and make very difficult decisions on the way, and continuously analyzing, and leading people, of course. So yeah, I think as a QA, it's good to have those organizational skills. I think that's really key, but it really depends on what type of products you're working with.
There's one question from Ali Farah, but I guess you can read it later. He's asking where you're going to have that lunch you're going to pay for. So I might not answer it. I guess you know guys each other. Uh,
Yeah.
Maybe just as a final note, if you could, you spoke about that, but maybe like really practical advices for those that are seeking to kickstart their career in the games industry.
My best advice, seriously, it's probably number four, what you see on this. Like, regardless of what you know, what education you have, where you have worked or you haven't, you need to get to know people. You need to get noticed by people. Otherwise, you're just one among many people trying to get into the industry. So I think networking, being you, your personality, and let that passion for gaming shine. It's really difficult to convince people that you're passionate if you don't care about gaming. But I'm sure the 122 people who are here listening to me babbling for an hour, half an hour, you are probably as passionate as I am. So you really need to make that shine and show that you really mean business and you really want to get in. And also doing the groundwork, understanding, asking the right questions, basically, understanding the gaps and the parallels. Yeah, that's the
Thank you
best
very
advice.
much, Bengin. Thank you very much for being with us here. We have 1 minute left, so you can still ask the questions. And Benkin has discussed if you can stay here another few minutes just to check if there are more questions coming in and then answer them in the chat.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everyone. We'll continue with the program. Thank you so much for the presentation.
Thanks, everyone.